My name is Maria Jackson, and today we will be discussing GUI Design and Development. Our agenda will begin with a brief introduction, and then we will discuss modern design features of GUIs, best practices during development, programming options, and we'll take a look at a couple case studies. In many ways, the GUI is the heart of a program. A lot of functionality may happen behind the scenes, but user and client's experiences with different programs and services really rely on the quality of their interaction with those products. There are two main approaches to GUI development: UX, or user experience, and UI, user interface design. So previous development approaches used a waterfall approach, which we will briefly discuss going forward, and modern development largely uses the agile methodology. Let's get started. Modern GUI design features include being simple, intuitive, user-focused, maintaining accessibility, and incorporating tools and libraries during the development process. Some of the most effective GUI features, again, are simplicity. That means the GUI is easy to navigate, and there's not too much information on any one component of the GUI that overloads the user. It's just simple, straight to the point, and there's not a lot to digest. Effective GUIs are also intuitive. That means their controls follow a set pattern of interaction that's established from the very first moment a user engages with the product until the end. And GUIs are also responsive. So if we were to change the screen size on an app, say a website, if we were to view that website on our desktop and then again on the phone, the size would change, and you would hope that that website is responsive and that all the components match the layout for the device it is being interacted with on. Effective GUIs are also user-focused. That means they put the users first. The developers think about how is the user going to be using this product, what's their experience going to be like, what are their needs, what are their wants, and development teams often incorporate feedback from users into the maintenance of their product. Effective GUIs should be accessible. This means that they offer a variety of features to accommodate the widest audience as possible. And effective GUIs incorporate tools and libraries. Those could be pre-built layout components. They could be wireframe design tools. Common tools are FlowMap, Miro, InVision, Balamic, and Figma. And you'll notice being user-focused and being accessible, I've highlighted these two features here because they are core concerns during GUI design, development, and maintenance, and we're going to be going into more detail soon. Next, we will cover best practices of GUI design and development. Best practices include implementing those effective GUI features we just discussed, especially maintaining flexibility, including responsive design, offering accessibility features, and staying user-focused. If we go into a little bit more detail, flexibility really goes into the design and the development and the maintenance of any product. And to do that, many development teams will use what's called the agile methodology. Previous GUI developers would use what was called the waterfall method. It's not that this method isn't currently used, it's just that The landscape for UX and UI design is very fast changing. There are new technologies coming out, new tools, libraries are constantly expanding and evolving. And for that reason, using what may be considered a kind of strict approach, such as waterfall, that follows a planning, design, implementation, testing, and release program development lifecycle, it can restrict the product itself and what it can offer users. That being said, with the agile methodology, development teams follow a more cyclic approach to development. They use many of the same stages: planning, design, implementation, testing, and release. However, at some point, and at many points throughout development, development teams will go back to previous steps, say planning to design new features, or design to figure out how the UX and UI will interact. Implementation, testing, these all are recurring, and the agile methodology is an iterative process of development. To continue, staying user-focused is a large concern during GUI development. Development teams are always trying to seek to understand their users. What do the users want? What do they need? Which sounds similar, but they are two different things. Staying user-focused also means incorporating user feedback into every stage: design, development, all the way through maintenance and the updates. And users don't have to be end users or consumers, they could be business partners. And so staying user-focused in that sense means maintaining a business focus. What are the requirements for the program or for the website? What are the costs? What are the restrictions? There's a lot to consider, and users come in all shapes and sizes. And finally, we have again accessibility. Accessibility means focusing on allowing everyone as much as possible to use the service or platform or product that's being designed. Accessible products incorporate things like subject headers, alt text on images, and link descriptions. This is especially prominent with website development, where some of the framework inside the web page will allow screen readers, for example, to know what page the user is on. Accessible products also include visual details to accommodate a wide variety of users, such as having a high contrast between the background colors and the text, using a limited amount of dynamic page changes, which would reduce the need to scroll or to click around the page. Those things, while they are very visually pleasing at times, they don't always make for the most accessible product. Next, we will discuss UX and UI design. The user experience design focuses on the structure and navigation of a product, while user interface design focuses on the look and feel of the product. And effective GUI development incorporates both. If we look at a UX development timeline, we'll see the same stages we discussed earlier: planning, design, testing, launch, and update. And these will be very similar to the UI development timeline, but let's take a look at a few specifics just to UX. During the planning stage, developers will consider the user path from beginning to end. They will consider their initial needs and their wants while using their product. And of course, they'll think about their business costs and goals, the overall budget for monetary reasons, for time, for sometimes space. Moving on to design. UX development focuses on the flow from one stop in the program to the next. If we're talking about a website, that means what does the user see when they're on the landing page? Is it easy to navigate away from that page? Can they log in? Can they access any other menus? And of course, they consider the page and screen layout optimization for those reasons. Testing. For UX development, that involves a lot of prototyping and building wireframes, working with various components, and thinking about what components will work best with the design that we've considered thus far. Finally, the product will launch. The product is deployed, and we can start to analyze the feedback generated from being used and update. We'll use that feedback to change or add new features and make the product hopefully easier to traverse. If we look at UI development timeline, it looks very similar, except that planning will focus on the visual aesthetics and the organization of the product. We'll consider color palettes and themes, and of course, accessibility. Design will often focus on applying styling to the framework that the UX development team has brought. UI development will also consider the thematic aspects that will help guide the interaction of the user. Will there be stylish pop-ups themed throughout the landing page, for example, to point the user where to go? Feedback. Now this section includes users, stakeholders, the marketing team, and all other business personnel getting input on whether or not the visual aesthetics fit the branding or the marketing or what they have planned the user experience to look like. And of course, that includes analyzing the usability of the interactive elements that they may include. Launch, the same as with the UX development, product is deployed, feedback is monitored, and we review our accessibility features to make sure we are staying on top of meeting our users' needs. And of course, we have updates, working with the development team, oftentimes working with the UX development team to design new features or to increase the ease of use of existing features. Next, we have programming options. There are a variety of different tools and libraries, of course, but there's also many different languages that developers can use. And the languages used may depend on web development, desktop apps, or mobile apps that are being developed. For web development, you largely have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There are React, Vue, and Angular as well, largely geared towards the interactivity and responsiveness of web development design. For desktop apps, we will see Visual Basic, C#, Java, Python, and the .NET framework. For mobile apps, we will see again JavaScript, Java, and Swift for iOS, and Kotlin for Android. Now we will look at a couple case studies that really showcase the differences that the user-focused approaches can have. Whether we're talking about end users, clients, business associates, those concerns will drive the design, development, and potentially the whole life cycle of our product. Our first case study will consider an example of a 3.js website. 3.js is known for allowing developers to incorporate many dynamic and visually stunning features to their websites. And then we'll look at a comparison between Apple and Spotify in their music player design. Here we have DotPad. This product appears to be an AI integrated braille pad, very cutting edge. The website does use 3.js, and as you can see, it is highly dynamic. It is visually centered. It appears to be marketed to the visually impaired audience. However, if we take a moment to view the elements that are always changing dynamically on screen while we scroll, we will see while it is very visually appealing, we start to ask questions. Is this an inclusive, accessible design? If we look at the inspector on the web page, as far as I could see, there were little to no header tags, no alt text on their images, which dominate the website design. And of course, these changes happen whilst scrolling, so that dynamic interaction is an integral part of the experience of this website. So now, while we thought this website marketed to visually impaired audience, does it really? Are they actually trying to engage with potential investors? Is this just for marketing? Will their end users actually be able to view this website and consider their product? Next, we'll take a look at Apple versus Spotify. When it comes to appearance and navigation, these two companies approached two seemingly different routes to design. If we compare the themes, Apple Music has a light theme with prominent cover art, and Spotify has a dark theme, again with prominent cover art. Apple Music's app focuses on displaying the artist and album first and foremost, whereas Spotify focuses on the song title and artist, and this information is not quite as prominent. Apple Music's music player incorporates additional controls in the space of the app, including volume, sharing or broadcasting, and downloading from the cloud, whereas Spotify leaves many of these controls to the user's device. There are no on-screen controls for volume or sharing, for example. They focus mostly on just playback, play, pause, back, forward, and shuffle. Apple Music focuses on the user library and the personalization of that app that's being used. When you first load the app, it'll have just your personal setup that you've been curating this whole time. It can make it a little bit difficult if you want to search for new music. Spotify, on the other hand, focused less on personalization and more on the artists, the music itself, creating playlists, reviewing other users' playlists, and incorporating trending music into someone's next music session. And overall, the Apple Music interface is very dynamic, it's interactive, it's got components that move around the screen with the user's touch, but Spotify's is more static. And it appears that it would be a bit more accessible in that regard. If we were to visit the Spotify app, we would see album covers and playlist covers just in a grid form. You might scroll a little bit, but there isn't this dynamic need to move around in order to engage or to accomplish what you set out to do when visiting the app. In conclusion, modern GUI development is flexible and accessible. UX and UI development are both necessary and vital to designing a GUI. And the user-focused design will drive how the GUI functions, how it looks, how it feels, and the overall experience that a user will have with that product. And once again, users could be customers or consumers, but they could be clients, investors, or other stakeholders with the company and with the product. And development will vary greatly, as we've seen, whether the focus is on one or the other. And finally, agile development incorporates user feedback and feedback of stakeholders into to cycle through the design and implementation stages iteratively. And that will allow GUI development to stay on the cutting edge of accessibility, responsiveness, and flexibility. Thank you very much. Again, I am Maria Jackson, and this has been a presentation on GUI design and development.